Welcome to Guitar Gavel, a place for people who love guitars. These are conversations with musicians, guitar enthusiasts, techs, and collectors about their guitar journey and their love of the instrument. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe button, share with your friends, and be sure to sign up for our twice weekly newsletter at guitargavel.com. Hello and welcome to the Guitar Gavel podcast. I'm your host, David Still, and I am super pumped to have my new friend, Jerry Cherry, as our guest today. Jerry is in the corner. I'm going to intro him up, and Jerry, then I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll say a couple of things. First off, everyone, including Jerry, but everyone watching or listening, thank you for your time. To hang out on a podcast, whether on video or audio, for 45 minutes to an hour is a big ask, and time is your number one asset. And so thank you very much for spending time with us. We really appreciate it. I'll say that on behalf of Jerry too. And of course, Jerry, thank you so much for your time as we're hanging out late in the afternoon prior to a weekend. Jerry is a guitarist, singer, songwriter. His fans on YouTube at Jerry Cherry Band, that is on YouTube at Jerry Cherry Band, also know him for his fabulous music videos, his guitar instruction videos. And if you're interested, definitely recommend checking him out. Every Sunday, he's generally speaking live for sure, generally speaking at noon Eastern on Sunday on YouTube, streaming from there. So we got a lot to go over. We're going to talk about Jerry's guitar story, kind of his career into the as a professional, and all the fun stuff, and look at some cool guitars. Jerry, I'm going to turn it over to you, brother. Thank you so much for being here, man.
All right. Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. I love your website and I love your posts and your guitars. It's always very inspiring.
Dude, thanks, man.
Yes.
Thanks. I like that for the guys that can really play. You know, I tell everyone I'm first and foremost a hack player, bedroom player. So I just love to watch guys like yourself. You know, we all.
Yeah.
I was telling Jerry before we hopped on, I'm like, Jerry, man, I try not to do any talking. And then here I am about to go on a monologue. But it's fun to watch. For guys that are not so great bedroom players such as myself, we love watching guys that can really play, fantasize like that'll be me one day, even if I'm 80 when that happens. So love watching you, man. And on that note, I'll shut up. I'll turn it over to you, man. Really.
No, keep going.
No. Sound like such a dork here in a minute if I keep going. So your origin story, right? Everyone who plays, whether you're a hack bedroom player like myself, there's typically oftentimes a defining moment or an aha moment. Like, this is when I decided I wanted to play, and I'm curious if that was the case for you and what that looked like, and how old were you when you started out?
Well, when I was 12 years old, my mom bought me my first guitar, and it was a Quartz. I don't know if you ever heard of the company, C-O-R-T.
Oh,
Probably
yeah.
Never.
Sure.
And it was basically a telly, and it looked a lot like this. It wasn't a 70th anniversary broadcaster like this one, but it was a Quartz, and it said Quart on the top of it, and it was a Telecaster, and I ruined it because what I did was I wanted it to be a Strat. So I took a hacksaw, and I think I turned it into a Strat. Like, I cut out this part of the body, make it look like kind of a Strat, and boy, did I butcher it. I was just like with little jigsaw, whatever it was I was using, hacksaw.
Yeah.
Ruined the guitar, put a few bumper stickers on it. But that was my first guitar, and I didn't have an amplifier. So I had an electric guitar with no amplifier, and somehow I figured out a way to plug it into my stereo. Basically, what I did was I had a speaker wire, just a regular speaker wire for your stereo system, and I took the bare wire on one end and I scotch taped it to the metal frame of the knobs on it. On the other cable, I taped just to the front panel of my stereo, just bare wire to the front panel, and it actually came through, like, miraculously. I don't know how it happened. I would turn up the stereo and I would actually hear my guitar coming through my speakers. I was like, wow, this is great. That was my first amp like that. And I don't know. I'm shocked that it actually worked. That was my first amp.
I can't believe it worked. This is crazy. Man, if you could go back in time and still have carried that stereo.
I remember it like it was yesterday. like
Would you
doing
still
that.
have it? Like, if you could still have the stereo, would you have kept it as just like a relic? Like, this is where it began?
Well, I still have a stereo. I could, a newer, better stereo that I barely ever use, but I could try it again on the new stereo and see if it works. I think I have some better technology now,
Yeah,
many years
yeah,
later.
that that sounds like back in the Jambox era, a buddy of mine had some crazy, like, not like crazy big Jambox, but some crazy, like, shortwave radio thing. I don't know, man, but I remember we went
Yeah.
out where you could listen to, like, FAA traffic and, like, bizarre stuff from
Yeah.
his Jambox, and we took it out, and we took his antenna, we extended it with some aluminum foil, and then we wrapped the aluminum foil around his gutter on his house. So we're using the gutter of his house as an antenna, man, and I'm pretty sure we heard some alien activity.
That is so funny. Oh my God. The crazy things that we used to do to make things
I
happen.
know.
We still do,
Yeah.
you know? Just got to do what you
Yeah.
got to do to make it
The
happen.
court guitar, just as a one-off, my local music store sells court.
Oh,
They
yeah?
yeah.
Funny.
And I can't remember if they're made by Samick. It doesn't matter. I won't go there, but they're still around. Yeah.
It
So
reminds me also of Trainor amps. Do you remember them? Trainors?
Trainer.
Tranor. And the reason I remember that is because that's the very beginning, too. I was 12 years old, and I was actually driving with a friend of mine. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So I was in Davie, Florida, which is like a small, kind of a country town in the middle of Fort Lauderdale. It was very small at the time. It's grown over the years. But I remember driving down, what was maybe Griffin Road, and we were going to Orange Groves. They may still be there. And actually, me and my friend were going to steal some oranges. And just that one, I remember that we're going to get some oranges because they would drop on the floor, and we'd, probably illegally like just grab some. They're right there on the floor. So, but on the way, we happened to pass this music store. It said Universal Language, and I knew it was a music store for some reason. So we wound up going in, and I'll never forget seeing this guitar player, and his name was Scott Goodman, and he had long. This is 1982. Okay, he had long, like curly black hair. I swore that it was Paul Stanley without his makeup. That's who I thought it was. I'm 12 years old, and I'm looking at this guy, and it's like, okay, and he's playing Van Halen. He's got the record on, and he's playing like Van Halen 1, and he's playing along with the whole record perfectly. And so imagine that, a kid 12 years old, 1982, what was happening at the time with guitars and stuff. And it just blew my mind because I didn't think that people could actually do that. It's like when you're 12, you think, okay, Eddie Van Halen, these are like these figures that are not human. So when you actually see somebody who's doing it right in front of your face, it was amazing and inspiring for me as a little kid at the time. And so I wound up taking two lessons from him, shortly after that. So
Who were you listening to when you were 12?
at the time, it was Ozzy Osbourne, Van Halen, AC/DC. It was all the early rock and roll stuff. Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, if I didn't say them already. It was all the stuff at the time, and then, some of the other bands started coming up. But I mean, from the time I was 10 years old, my first concert actually was on my 11th birthday. My mom took me to see AC/DC. That was my first concert. It was for Those About to Rock. I always thought that it was I was 10 years old, but I actually wound up looking back at the venue. It was the Hollywood Sportatorium, and I looked at that date, and it turns out that it was actually January 28th of 1981. So I just turned 11 years old, and that was my first concert. And she bought tickets there, and it turns out she bought front row seats.
Wow.
So here I am, like 11 years old, front row at the Hollywood Sportatorium for AC/DC, for Those About to Rock. And that's when they had the cannons and everything. So I was getting so scrunched up when the concert started that they actually had to pull me out, and they put me like in the bouncer's booth, which was between the front row and the stage where all the bouncers would hang out and photographers. And then I got moved over to like the side. So I wound up watching most of the concert kind of from the side, because I was just too small to be like in the front row at AC/DC then. But for my first concert at 11 years old to see, and it was the loudest, even to this day, AC/DC was the loudest rock concert I've ever been to. And I've seen them like 6 times since then, and it just gets louder and louder. No wonder Brian Johnson kind of lost his hearing for a
Yeah,
while.
maybe
That was
so.
no joke. They were loud.
What a cool mom.
The coolest. Rock and
Yeah,
roll mama. Rock and
yeah,
roll mama.
that's great, man. It wasn't my first show, but I remember my mom dropped me off. This is a few years after you, man. Lollapalooza, 92.
Yeah.
After school, she drove me, and this is back in the day. Like, dropped me off. I think my older sister was there. I don't know. I don't. I'm pretty sure I remember my buddy that I went with. Like 3 o'clock, came home at like 10 or 11, and which is just like really out
Oh
of
yeah.
character for my mom. But she just didn't know. I knew, she didn't know.
Oh yeah.
Dude, all right. So when you were going from like 12, 13, 14, 15, early years playing, so you're a
Yeah.
fantastic player. Were you like in it just grinding, man, hours a day, or was that later? And I'm curious as to that part when you're 13, you don't think you're serious, but when you really started attacking it a lot.
Yeah. Well, I knew, just going back a little bit further, when I was 7, I lived with my grandparents for a while, and my grandfather had an acoustic guitar lying around all the time because his son, my uncle Lenny, is a guitar player. Even to this day, he's in his 70s and he's still amazing. Like he's a guitar player from like the 50s and stuff. So they, they always had a guitar lying around, and I remember like as a little kid banging into it and like just hearing the sound of it. My grandfather would strum some chords, so I think that was initially why I fell in love with the guitar, because I actually hit the guitar and it would hit the E string and the A string, and it would go boom, 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 boom. And my grandfather was a big fan of westerns, like country westerns, and we used
Yeah.
to watch Hee Haw all the time, and we used to watch the show called Wild Wild West, and it was a famous TV show, and it took place in like the old western days. And basically, the theme song was boom, 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 boom. It was a famous song, and I would bang into the guitar, and I didn't realize it, but the first open E and A was boom, 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 boom. So it actually was the first song that I actually learned was that one by accident. And so I knew, like, even then, that music was going to be something that I wanted to do. But it then actually, when my mom bought me my first electric guitar at 12, then it was like, okay. And then I saw, like I was saying, I saw Scott Goodman playing, and that's when I realized that it was real. Like the possibility of being a human being and being a musician was possible, and that stars didn't just kind of fall from the sky. They were actually real people that could do it.
So did you know then, like, hey, I want to do this, forever and try to make it go at
Absolutely,
it? Yeah.
absolutely. I knew it. I think I started playing, and then I got into a year. I think it was like maybe a year later where I was actually breakdancing for like 6 months.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
doing all like the crazy wave stuff. I think I like used to spin on my head. It was like what was going on at the time. But then I think it was like maybe a little bit after that where I was like, okay, I'm starting to play, and starting to play a little bit more. And actually, a friend of mine, I think I was 14 at the time, and a friend of mine came over, watched me play, and he said, "Hey, you know what? There's this guy that lives down the street. His name's Carl, and he's a really good guitar player. Like, you should go like check him out." And I was like, okay, let's go see who this Carl was. So I'll never forget like walking down the street with my friend going to see Carl. And so we get to his apartment, open the door, and like his girlfriend, like he lived with his girlfriend at the time. He was a little bit older. He was like 17 or 18. Lived with his girlfriend, and Sandy is her name. And so we go in, like he's in the back, and I just remember him like he was trying to look for something behind the bed. Like, and all of a sudden he pops up. I could still picture him popping up because he had this really curly, frizzy hair, and he was really tan. He wasn't wearing a shirt, and he was a block mason, like 17, 18. Like he was doing block work. So he was out in the sun, South Florida. It's curly hair freak. But boy, man, could he play guitar. 17, 18. He was like the opposite of me, because I was not very good. I mean, I knew nothing. I was like, if I'm any good right now, it's because I've worked very hard getting to that point. At the very beginning, I had my own style where I knew nothing about the instrument. Even at that point at 14, what I knew was I would just make sounds. I would just play anywhere on the neck, and if it sounded good to me, it sounded good. Like I didn't know what the notes were. I didn't know chords. I knew some power chords. I knew some songs, that you would learn. But he knew the guitar. He was the exact opposite. Like first of all, he had perfect pitch, which we discovered very quickly after that.
That's not
And
fair.
then also he knew like the instrument. He knew that the chords and the scales, and he knew all the songs. Like we both love Rat. Say, hey, play Rat. He would play anything by Rat, all the songs, Round and Round, Lay It Down. He was really into Judas Priest, so he knew like, Living After Midnight. He knew all the solos. It was just like, once again, it was like meeting Scott Goodman at that music store. It was like seeing someone who actually knew what they were doing. And it was so inspiring. So we became really good friends, and he would show me some things, and we started writing together. So at 14, 15, we actually started, like, I knew enough to just come up with riffs. I knew enough to like, so that we could actually play together. Like he was really, really good, and I wanted to be really, really good. And I was able to, and together we formed like a really interesting combination, because I had something that he didn't have. Like I had that just kind of go for it anywhere, and he was very within the scale and what he knew, which was awesome. So together we kind of just came up with riffs, and we wrote all these songs. We had like maybe 4 or 5 songs.
That's cool.
That we wrote. And just to wrap up this real quick, I think it was like, I didn't see him for like maybe 5 or 6 months. And it turns out that in his high school, I think he had just graduated, but he knew some musicians from his high school that were really good musicians, one of them being a drummer named Ronnie Oakes. And Ronnie wanted him to form a band. Carl and Ronnie form a band, and he said, yeah, let's do it. But there's this guy that I've been jamming with, and we have maybe like 4 or 5 songs. You should meet him. So Ronnie and Carl come to my house one day, and they're like, hey, we're looking to put this band together. Let's do it. It's like, all right, let's go. So basically that was the beginning of my first band. Luckily, because I met this great guitar player, and he knew this absolutely phenomenal drummer from high school. And now here I am in the middle of with these 2 guys and myself, and I barely even know how to play the darn thing, and I'm 15, just turning 15. Actually, I think I'm still 14 at this time.
Wow.
So now we're in his garage and we're writing songs. And so I feel like that was probably the most important thing that ever happened to me in my life, was meeting Carl that day, because that brought me in with a group of people that were really, really, number one, good people. Number 2, great musicians. And I think if you want to become great, you have to surround yourself with great people. And just by playing with them, we created something that was unique within Ronnie's drums, Carl's great guitar playing and perfect pitch. We used to call him Ear. That was his name, Ear.
Oh man, yeah.
And me with my whatever it is that I brought to the table, and that was the beginning of my musical journey. And I knew right from there on, it took me away from where I was up until that point in my short life, which was only 14 years. But I feel like I could have went that direction, because the neighborhood that I was actually in wasn't all the best of neighborhood. And a lot of people from where I grew up, they kind of went down the wrong path with a lot of things, with drugs and who knows what else. And I kind of got lucky. I fell into music, and I wound up being with some really good people that took me off to a better place. And I'm grateful for that.
How long did you get to play with them? Did that last for a
That
while?
band lasted for a while. I was 14. I hit 15. We got our first singers. We got some bass players. The band was called No Reason. No Reason. It was Reason, Reazen. We used to switch one letter. That was kind of the thing. No Reason. So we were like, a rocking band. We played gigs all over. We were playing at the clubs in South Florida. I was 15, 16 playing gigs. Still in high school. Actually wound up quitting high school, and I wound up going back and graduating. And so yeah, playing all the clubs. And basically we were together for up until 1991. So it was really the 80s. We formed in like 84, 85, played all through the late 80s. And then in 90, 91 is when, we started to, the singer, we realized that we wanted to go a different actually, the other guitar player, Carl, wasn't happy with where the singer was, because he wanted to be, because in the late 80s, 90s, the singers around that time were very, very just amazing. You had to be like an amazing singer back then just to get into that genre. And we didn't really kind of utilize the singer we have to his full potential. I think we expected too much from him. Instead of just kind of using what he was really great at, he tried to just replace him with someone who had a different style of voice. And then shortly after that, Carl wound up quitting. But me and Ronnie stick together. Me and the drummer stick together for a while, and we formed some other things. But that band, No Reason, lasted a long time. And one funny story about that: a song that we wrote from that band actually made it to my latest record.
No doubt.
A song called "Down to the Wire," and Carl wrote the opening riff to that, and I wrote the lyrics, because that's the way we used to work in the band. Like, somebody would write a riff, we would all arrange the song, and then somebody may come in and come up with a melody and a lyrics. So I wrote Down to the Wire lyrically, and he came up with the riff that was just a simple riff. And basically the reason I put that on my album is because the title is called Down to the Wire. And I always felt like in sports, they're always saying this game is down to the wire. I should be talking to the camera right there. I don't know if you can see my eyes, if it's even helpful.
You're good, man. I'm like,
okay.
So dark here.
Yeah,
I'm like,
and that's one thing. It's like, Down to the Wire. I really wanted to release that because every time you're watching a game, and it's in the fourth quarter, it's 2 minutes left, and the Steelers are playing the Patriots, whatever, and it's down by 3. The commentators would always say, this game's down to the wire. We'd go to a commercial, and it is down to the wire. It's coming down to the end. You just hear that. Every time I would hear that year by year, I'd go, man, I really have to record the song Down to the Wire, because I just hear that in the background as they're going to commercial break. This one's down to the wire, and you hear my song Down to the Wire. So I'm like, I got to record that. So finally, when I released my album Married to Myself, I recorded Down to the Wire. And now actually that song is on a sports podcast that enters the sports podcast. And it's a Pittsburgh Steelers, where I'm a fan. I'm a Steelers fan of a Steelers network called the Steel Curtain Network. It used to be called Behind the Steel Curtain, which is still their website, but they just changed to a new format. It's called Steel Curtain Network now. And they have lots of podcasts. Like every day they have podcasts, like 2 or 3 different podcasts, 7 days a week. And they use all my music, mostly all of my music. But it started off with Down to the Wire. So one of the podcasts is called Let's Ride. Jeff Hartman is the talks Steelers. So Down to the Wire riff that Carl wrote in 1987 is the riff that starts off their flagship podcast. It's called Let's Ride by the Steel Curtain Network. And so every 3 days a week, I listen to it because I'm a Steelers fan, and it doesn't hurt that my music is in it. And it starts off into the riff, goes into his podcast. He goes to a break. It ends with that same song, and then starts off with a second song that I have, the intro to Married to Myself, does the second half of his podcast, and it fades out. So, I'm grateful for that. And it's funny how, like, I knew that I wanted to record that song, and here it is now on a sports podcast many, many years later. So if it's a good song, it's a good song no matter how long ago you wrote it.
And I think there's something to be said about having that mental intention in kind of airing it out, and like it can happen. It does happen. This is how stuff happens. Like,
right.
Right. All right. I'm going to deviate for a second, if you don't mind, because I want to talk about your vocals. You got a good set of pipes too. So like from the guy over here, right? You can play, you got the hair, you got the vocals, you can sing. I'm curious about your development in singing, and if that was just you had a natural voice, or did you really work on it? We'll take I'm curious as to how that played out too.
I really had to work on it.
Yeah.
And if I have any kind of voice whatsoever, it's strictly because I finally accepted what I sound like and who I am vocally. I feel like, as a guitarist, I always wanted to be the lead singer too. I just think that's probably my problem. Was like a blessing and a curse in a way. It's because, growing up in the 80s, you play guitar and then you see these singers and they're just so amazing, and they're getting all the girls and everything. Or really what it comes down to is you get tired of working with, and you hear this everywhere. The guitarist is like, I can't find the singer because I can't get along with the singer. I can't find the right guy. So I'm just going to do it myself. I don't need a singer. I'll do it myself. And that's basically kind of what happened with me. I never found the right singer I wanted to really work with. So it's like, and I loved writing. Even from the first day I picked up the guitar, I was writing music, and I was singing it and come up with, like Down to the Wire, how I came up with that. And then the singer would sing it, but I wrote the melody because as a guitarist, you just hear these melodies naturally, and so finally, like, I think it was playing through No Reason, and which I was a guitarist, and then getting into other bands. It really wasn't until like maybe around the mid 90s, where I was like, it's like, I'm going to sing and start singing myself, and I started booking some gigs at some coffee shops. It would just be me and my acoustic, and I would sing my songs, and I would sing some covers. And, people would start to like it. And, I started building up like a little bit of a following around town, playing at coffee shops. And that was a lot of fun, but I was really starting to develop my own voice at that time. And then I would put a band together, and we'd start doing some live gigs. And I think it was around 2000 where I actually wound up 2001, where I got back with Ronnie Oakes, my old drummer. So years later, actually I'm skipping this other project that I did with Ronnie, but in 2000, speaking of my voice, we formed a band, Ronnie and I, and a bass player. It's a 3-piece. And I was singing, and I was going for anything vocally. Like, I still didn't know what I wanted to do vocally. So I was just trying. I was screaming. I was singing soft. So I was just kind of doing whatever, just finding myself. And luckily, the band was gracious enough to just kind of go with it and just kind of see where it would go. And so it got to the point where a few years later, when I moved to New York, and still at that time, I started really kind of getting into the White Stripes and stuff, and taking that approach where it's just like Jack White would just kind of just go for it, and so I was kind of copping that vibe a little bit. And when you come to New York, the realization of who you are and what you are kind of hit you really fast in the face, and it's just like, wow, you're in New York, you think you're one thing, but then you realize kind of quickly that's like you're not all that, and you have to kind of like learn quick, so I realized in New York that my guitar playing was my strongest attribute that I had, and the guitar is what kind of was moving me along to doing different things, gigging and playing with people. My voice wasn't, nobody was really hiring me for my voice. They were hiring me for my guitar. And so, but I still really love singing. And I realized from watching all the talent that was surrounding myself with, and I was like, what's the difference here? What are they doing that I'm doing? And I learned, it's like singing in tune, how important that is. It's very common and very basic, but a lot of people don't even think about, the singing in tune. When I mean like just singing, I mean like all of the parts of it, not just like the notes, hitting the notes in the intervals, like how you're coming out of a note, how you're slurring out of a note, and it took me a while to actually realize that and try to deliver a song with the right aggression that you want to deliver it in and singing in tune. And I think finally, like after just trying it and going for it, you start to, my voice started developing, and I started to record myself more. I made a couple of records, and and by recording and hearing back, you start to know what sounds good, and sometimes you get lucky with a sound and you just ride with it. And but really hearing yourself back and then training yourself to be more in tune, and to just be and number one is to just be expressive with what you're trying to get across in a song, like you're communicating with someone. So there's like really like three elements, either sing in tune perfectly. Well, the ultimate thing is to sing in tune and be like very dynamic, and you got it all. Like if you're like Freddie Mercury at that point. You're like a great voice, great delivery, you got it all. Or you're just singing in tune, but you have no aggression, no delivery, and you're just boring at that
Yeah.
point. You're just like auto-tune perfection, and it's like lifeless. Or you're all aggressive, you don't care what you sound like, but man, you're going for it. So it's three things. So number one, if you have that, it's great. But number two, sing in tune, but develop your personality in there. Okay. And then number three, be completely aggressive, but start to be in tune. So it's kind of a combination of finding out what it is that you want to deliver, and then going live every Thursday singing for 2.5 years is what I did until recently. Really, I think helped a lot too. So that's kind of a long-winded story about my development in singing, and but it really comes down to like a belief in yourself, and really kind of being critical about what it is that you sound like, and listening to people, and getting, you know, and taking the criticism that people will give you, whether it's good or bad. I think that the worst criticism is probably the best if you could take it, because there's little things that people have said to me over the years that really stuck with me, and that's the kind of stuff that drives you and makes you want to prove them wrong.
Well, it's easy from just like a layman's perspective, average Joe's perspective, like, oh, you're born with this natural talent. You're born with a voice, whatever it is. And it's good. I mean, you didn't provide a formula, but you provided the method to your madness and your retrospect and everything, and put it in a cohesive story. That's really good, because you can do it. You just have to work.
Yeah.
Unless and there are some people in this world, God didn't put you here to sing, man. Like, sorry.
Right. Well, I mean, I can carry a tune, and I made 2 records, and one of them is actually number 19 on the New Music Weekly charts. So, I mean, I've learned how to express myself enough to get the point across. I'm not saying I had no like vocal ability. I just didn't really know what I sounded like, and I didn't know the importance of it. Like it's just weird. It's a time where it finally just kind of clicks in you. We're just like, you know what? Because I would see people that didn't do it nearly as long as I have, but they had like a confidence about them and a natural ability about them. I was like, wow, they're just like doing it. They sound good. So there's a few elements that, as a performer, that I think you should just kind of recognize. Number one, number two, number three, of what you want to express before you do it.
That's cool.
And here's what you want to achieve.
Okay, along the same lines of you working on the singing, and I want to go back to the playing for a minute, because you've got the band story. Started playing 12, 13, met the older guy, dropped out of school, we played together for a really long time. You went back to school. When in your journey did learning the theory and the notes come into play? And did you sit down and did you ever get methodical about that? Or was it you learned along the way, and just the cumulative effect of 10 years, like you finally had it? I'm curious.
And I was basically a sponge.
Okay.
A sponge.
Yeah.
Someone had said once, actually, it was a rest in peace, a friend of mine, Doug, who passed away. He had said years ago, either you're naturally talented or you're really intelligent, or you're both. And he would put like Prince in that category. Naturally talented and very intelligent would be like Jimmy Page is intelligent. His songwriting is brilliant, but like he wasn't like the best. He was kind of sloppy in certain ways, and I don't want to. I love Jimmy Page, but I think his creativity and his intelligence surpassed like his ability to actually play the guitar. He had so many great ideas and obviously wrote so many beautiful songs. But when you have a guy like Prince or maybe even Paul McCartney, they have both of those, their ability. So I really feel like I was probably smarter than I was with my natural ability on it. So when I first started taking some lessons, I took 2 lessons from that guy from Scott Goodman, who he showed me 2 Van Halen songs, you know. But it wasn't until I was 17, and then I went back to that same studio, Universal Language Studio, and I met another guitarist there. His name is Wesley B. Wright, and he was actually the original guitarist for the Miami Sound Machine. So it was really, really good, nice guy, and he gave lessons there. So I wound up taking lessons from him, real legit lessons where he taught me theory. So I'm 17. I'm going to point now, I'm still in No Reason. I'm surrounded by a lot of great guitarists. It's 1987 at this time. You can only imagine like what the standard was playing guitar at that time. And there were some cats around town that were just amazing that I still, even to this day, Dave Scott, I'm friends with still, and check him out, Dave Scott, or definitely please recommend watching Dave Scott. I grew up with this guy when I was 14 years old, played in a band with him, strange years later in 97 called the Nocturnals. Imagine getting in a band with your guitar idol as a second guitarist. So he's still playing. He's still great. So it's 1987. So I'm like, I really got to figure out what I'm doing here, you know? So I took some lessons, and he basically showed me modes. He showed me like the scale, and he showed me like what the modes were, 7 basic church modes, I guess, of the major scale. And so he showed me a few things. But the thing is, I took like a handful of lessons from him, but I wound up stopping at a very crucial time that I feel like the very next lesson with him would have been like very, very important. So I wound up spending like the next 25 years of my life trying to figure out what it is that would have been that next lesson if I would have just took one more lesson. And it wasn't until I met a guy in New York here who's probably one of the best guitarists on the planet. His name's Teddy Kumpel. Teddy Kumpel. Oh my God, just brilliant. Saw him play. We did a gig. He played right after me one night at Rockwood Music Hall, this venue here in the city. And I was so blown away by him. I was like, I got to like learn some of what you're doing. He played like really like an outside style. Like he would play blues and he played like outside. It was just like watching one of his favorite guitarists was John. Oh Jesus, it's slipping me right now. John Scofield. He's a big John Scofield. If you can think of his style, he plays a lot like him. So I went up going to his place, and he basically took over where I left off when I was 17. He cleared up. It was just like, wow. It was like, oh my God, all these years, I finally get it. Like, because I knew like the modes all my life. Like my whole musical knowledge system was based around what I had learned when I was 17, which was basically, so you get the major scale and you have the 7 notes of the major scale, and each note is its own scale because of its mode. But I kind of built chords around it, and I built music, and everything would resolve around the 7 chords of the major key. But I never quite understood the dimension of what each note does of the mode, you know. And finally, what he showed me was that by going into other scales like melodic minor scales, the harmonic minor, by learning some of those scales, which are harder scales, and understanding those modes, it made the simple stuff like the major scale that much more easy to comprehend. And it's like, wow. So because you have like the 5 scales, you have the major scale, melodic minor scale, harmonic minor scale, harmonic major scale, and double harmonic major. So basically, there's like 35 modes within that 5 scale, 7 modes. That's 35. And I don't know them all very well. I'm working on it still to this day. But if you know all of that, you basically know every scale in music. And they're all very slightly different from each other, like only 1 or 2 notes different. So when you start doing the harder ones and seeing what you could do, it makes the easy major scale like ice cream. It's very simple and very vanilla. So, you know, I really have to thank Teddy Kumpel for opening up my mind to, or giving me that final lesson that really kind of opened it up for me. And since then, I really, really was able to take it to the next level. And, you know, so it has a lot to do with what I teach now on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, talk about, so that you said it perfectly. I want to emphasize you you the one lesson that took you 25 years to get. You said it better than that. I don't remember what it was. It was great. I'm like, wow, that's powerful. And then there's like hope for everyone, myself included. You know, one day it will click.
Yes.
You got to put it. You got to put in some homework. It will
Yeah.
work. But your YouTube channel, you've got a lot. You've done a lot of work on it. A lot of great videos for the love of helping people, for the love of music. I mean, that's your core, which is so admirable. But talk about your channel, man, because you've just put all this work into it to help people. I don't know, how do you come up with stuff? So we can talk about how do you come up with certain concepts, what hits you. It's just great. So a terrible way to ask the question. You just take it from there.
Well, I mean, when the pandemic hit, you remember that pandemic thing? Did you know about that?
I don't remember anything before the pandemic, but I remember the
Yeah, I
pandemic.
know, right? But I started going live. It's something I never even in a million years would think that I would ever do, because people would go live before the pandemic, and I'd be like, "What are you doing, going live?" Everything that I'd done was basically beforehand, and then I'd post it. You know, it was never like a live person. I never went live before the pandemic, even on my phone, at shows, never. But someone had mentioned, while we're all home doing nothing, hey, you should do some live concerts like everyone else is doing. And I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. And I was like, you know what? All right. So I looked into it. I learned about Ecamm and how to stream, and I learned how to do a live and how you would structure it a little bit, set it up, and I started going live playing songs on Facebook. Every Thursday night at 7:30, I would go live. And I did that from I think the first one was April 20th, no, April 16th, 2020, and I did it for 125 weeks in a row. So I did it for 2.5 years until a few months back, and I finally stopped doing it. But that was my first experience with live. At the time, I was doing some YouTube videos too, which was not live. I was just making videos, and you know, I knew that I wanted to get into some content creation. So what else? What am I going to do? I mean, I'm a guitarist, so I could do guitar solos. I could do like some gear, but I wasn't very focused at first. Like when I first started, I made like this 1 hour long video on like the music business, because I just released an album, and like all of a sudden now I can't play it because the pandemic I released an album, Married to Myself, December of 2019, and then January, February, all of a sudden March, and now we're all stuck at home. So I really dove into like knowledge of the music industry and put out a long video about that. And then I started to learn about YouTube and what it is that I wanted to do with it. So I started making videos. Actually, I'll tell you really quick. I wanted to basically learn how to fill in the descriptions of a YouTube video and basically check all the boxes. So I'm searching around trying to learn about YouTube, and I stumbled across this site called Think Media, and this guy Sean Cannell, and they offered a week challenge, like a week free schooling as far as learning YouTube. So we're all basically home doing nothing. So I was like, all right, I have a week. So basically 2 times a day, they would do these shows on teaching people about YouTube and how to be successful and how to make money. And like basically all I wanted to know was like, why do some videos take off and like some don't? Like, is it some boxes that they're not checking off? I basically wanted to learn, like, how do I fill out a description? How do I make a title? That's it. But this actually wound up changing my life, actually, because they taught me so much that I never even imagined, like I would even be interested in, like how to actually build a business around video. So I took this whole challenge for a week where every day I took notes and I would learn about all this stuff on how to make a video, how to deliver it, how to upload it. It was basically all the tactical parts behind it, but it wasn't just tactics. It was more of like, trying to find your niche, what's important to you as a person, and what message you're trying to deliver. Things I never even thought were important. It's like, because I started my channel in 2008, my YouTube channel, but all I did was I'd put up a video every now and then, just of something like a video storage, and I would share on my website. I'd post a link or whatever, but it was nothing that I thought was like a search engine or people would search for. These were videos I just as a holding ground for my videos. So basically at this time though, I'm learning about YouTube. So I start making videos that were very focused. Like, okay, I'm going to take a solo. I'm going to take like, You Shook Me All Night Long, and I'm going to record, because I've been playing in bands, tribute bands, for quite some time now. So I've played almost every solo that the 80s have to offer.
Yes.
And like, and I've had to learn them like note for note. I've studied them, and that was my thing. Like, if I'm going to do this, I might as well like get something out of it. So I would learn the solos perfect. And that was one thing I was very proud of when I would play gigs that would maybe separate me from maybe 90% of the other people that were playing in these 80s bands, is that they never really took the time to learn it perfectly. So, you go to a show and you might see a guy, the solo would come up and you do it close, but it would never be right. Like, I'd notice it because I'm a guitarist. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to teach these solos. And I'm going to teach them as perfect as I can do it. So I started, doing guitar solo videos and get my feet wet. And then I learned about, some affiliate links that you could do. You could do like a pedal, teach about a pedal, and then you could put like a link in the description, which links to Amazon. So if people are interested in it, they could go to the description, click on it, and you would make like a few bucks if it sells. So I learned that's one thing they teach you on the business of YouTube as well. And then, basically fast forward, this May of this year, coming up in a few months, will be 3 years since I took that course, because it was May 20th. Actually, so going back a second, after that week, of course, they're like, okay, well, we have a course now. So they give you the free week, and they're like, now we have a course if you want to go deeper. And it was expensive. And I was thinking to myself, man, I'm really into this. And I had no money. It was in the middle of the pandemic, not working, had a little bit of money. This course was expensive too. And I was like hesitant, but I went for it. And I've never bought a course. I never was into any of this stuff. And the course, I mean, the payments were broken up like over a year. So I was actually, was able to do it. And you can quit. But if you quit before you ended up paying the whole thing, you would lose the access to the whole course.
Right. Of course.
So you wind up going, and I wound up actually paying the whole thing and never really going back and studying the course. Because once I did it, like, I didn't have to refer back to it for anything. So now it's like done. But you're still like grandfathered into any updates that they make on it. Think Media, I highly recommend if you want to learn the art of just marketing. And they have actually another podcast called Think Marketing podcast. Think Media now turned into more of their cameras and gear talk, reviews and stuff like that, where the podcast just speaks about how you could take your goals and what you want to do as a content creator and just kind of spread it out to the world, and ideas. I mean, every day I listen to it, and if I hear like a good idea, I'll write it down. I'll try to incorporate that somehow. So coming up in May, it'll be 3 years. And I kind of wanted to just see where I am in 3 years from when I started to May 30th. And I think I just kind of came up with a show that is going to really kind of push the channel faster, so that when I think March 20 comes along, I think it's going to be a kind of a big jump from now, even though it's only a few months. I just started this new idea like last week called What's the Hook? And I just released the first thing, What's the Hook? And it's doing something that I've been wanting to do for a while. And it's basically talking about music, pinpointing the hooks that are in the music, and pinpointing the essence of the video that I think is really, really cool about the song, theory-wise.
Yeah.
And I think the format that I'm doing it is going to grab a lot of attention from watching videos that are successful. I think I'm going to try to apply some of that into what I'm doing with What's the Hook, and it's going to be a pretty good experience to go along with the lives. So now I have a live that's been growing my channel, because when the world kind of came back, I wasn't able to make as many videos per se, but my live was continuous. Like, I was doing the live Facebook things, but it really was a while later. I think it was December of that year I started going live on YouTube. But I wanted it to be different, because on Facebook, I feel like I could just sing and I didn't care, because no one's going back on the Facebook that I know of and watching all those. I would make up stuff. My live streams turned into like, hey, request hour. I would sing stuff I didn't
Yes,
know. I would just
dude, yes,
play, and it was the funnest part of it.
that's
But I
great.
didn't want my YouTube to be like that. I didn't want to put out a bunch of, I'm not going to say junk. I wanted to be more focused on what I felt I do really well. And I thought that was more guitar orientated. So that was more focused. And my lives, I wanted to be, what am I going to do? My first live was like, okay, I had a couple modes and I sang a few songs because the people I came expected to be like Facebook where I like sang. But I was like, quickly after that, I realized, okay, it's going to be different. My very second live, I wound up doing a Poison song. I wound up doing like, I Won't Forget You, Baby. It was a song from Poison. I Won't Forget You. And I did the solo. And to this day, it's still one of my best viewed lives, my second one. And I've done like, I'm at 117 now, episode 117. So episode 2, it was like, bam. And then it just kind of, but I want it to be more guitar focused as far as the YouTube lives go. And but that really, when I stopped doing, I think in last year I only made like 5 videos, whereas in 2021 it was basically every Wednesday. But then like life came back and gigs started playing. We started playing and I was starting to work more. I couldn't make as many regular videos, but the lives I wanted to be. I didn't want that to stop. So going live is basically like a video as well, because you're uploading a video.
Yes.
And your format is like a video, depending on how you do the lives, how you structure them. Like I'm sure the thumbnails, the title. So you put just as much work into going live as you do if you're making a structured video. So that's basically for most of last year was keeping my YouTube channel alive, was going live and then taking that clip and kind of splitting it up into, for like little clips on Instagram, which you could take the best minute of what I did live and then make a really good minute of it on Instagram or a reel. I'm finding that like a year, 2 years later, I'm taking solos that I did and I'm making shorts out of them now, where I'm just taking the solo from the video without giving the instruction of it and then making YouTube short. And those things are doing very well. YouTube shorts are doing pretty well these days.
Because you've created evergreen content, right? Like you just said, that's not going to go away. That's really cool. Wait, man, that's another podcast. Like I would love to hear more about that. It's fascinating. It's a lot of work for people that don't know. That is just a ton of work. It's like its own part-time job, and we'll just hold it there. You were talking about learning in all your cover bands or tribute bands as they're known as now. Learning all the solos note for note to the best of your ability. You're 99 to 100% on. That's your goal.
Yep.
I'm curious, how did you do that? I'm assuming I don't want to make any assumptions, actually. I'm very curious because you decided this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to attack it. So that must have involved a lot of listening and a lot of rewinding, depending on the era, or a button back. I would love to hear a little bit about how you approach that.
Well, I never really learned stuff perfectly note for note until maybe it was like around 2001 or 2. We had this fun little tribute band that we were putting together. We were doing some covers one night, and one of the songs we were picking was My Sharona. And like, that's a great long guitar solo, My Sharona. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn this one perfectly just to impress my friend who's playing keyboard, Scott Spooner, who is my oldest friends, plays the piano, keyboards and that. And I want to play that to impress him. So I learned it perfectly. And at the time it wasn't hard enough to where I couldn't just learn it at pitch, at speed. I learned it as close as I could just by stopping and rewinding and learning it that way. But then when I moved to New York and I started getting into some working bands and I wanted to perfect these solos, I knew that I can get them right. So I did was I finally, actually, I'm on the road with Chubby Checker in the bus. And I get this gig in an 80s tribute band. At the time, they were called the Rubik's Cube. They're still around. And so I get this gig to play with them. And what they do, and like a lot of 80s bands do, the guitar player will play Eruption in the middle as a guitar solo. That's kind of like the standard. You got to play Eruption. And I never really played Eruption before. I mean, messed around with the tap part, but I never really learned, never had to. But now, like, I have to because now I'm getting paid to do it. So here I am on the tour bus with Chubby Checker, like bouncing around, and I got no time, so I got a gig when I get home. So I'm learning Eruption, like sitting down with no amp. I got this like iRig thing that barely works at the time. It was like 2009 or something like that. I'm struggling with this stuff, and I'm trying to learn Eruption from this YouTube guy, who's teaching it, right? So I'm learning it. Can't even hear. I'm not even in an amp really. So I'm playing it, and he showed it to me wrong. He showed it to me like the tap part was like harder than it actually was. He was actually telling me to tap twice on this part. And if you could imagine that, I was actually doing that. So I learned it. And there's actually a video of me playing it from 2009 Eruption, actually wrong. I'm playing it twice as hard. I'm tapping twice where it should just be one. I'm actually hitting it twice, which is ridiculous. So it's twice as hard. So anyway, at that point, then I stumbled across this program, which is everything. It's called The Amazing Slowdowner.
Yeah.
It was a CD that I bought. It was $50, the best investment I ever had. And it basically took every song and it slowed down without changing the pitch to like 20%. So now I could take every solo. You have to own the song because you can't import like any song. You have to actually buy the track to import it into this program, which I didn't mind doing. So I pop in the song, whatever it was, whether it's Talk Dirty to Me from Poison or Eruption, or if it was White Snake, you pop it in and you could slow it down without changing the pitch of the guitar, which was amazing because before you would slow down. If you slow down a record, you're slowing down the pitch too. Everything goes down in it. So you didn't have to detune to it. And now it's like I could hear every note that's happening in the solo, much like the old days when you would put a quarter on the record. That was a little bit before my time, but some guys that I know would do that. They put the quarter on the record and would slow down the record, but then you have to tune down to the album and learn stuff that way. Amazing Slowdowner allowed me to really slow down everything, and I would learn it. I'd find the notes, and they would just speed it up. It would start to make sense. Okay, you're getting it to 20%, which is really slow. Then 30, then 40, and then you start hearing what's happening. Then 50, and if you could play it perfectly at 50, half speed, then all you got to do is slowly get it faster.
Yeah.
It's a very, very simple process. Like if you could play it at 50, you could play it at 100. It's just a matter of working yourself up to tempo.
Yeah.
And that's what I did on all the solos. I'd practice it and I'd get it faster and I'd get it at 80, and some were really, really hard at 80. When I was doing Eruption, man, at 80%, that was like blazing fast. I'm like, I'm just getting it at 80. And it's like, okay, 90, 100, he's just really whizzing by. But luckily, not every guitar solo is that hard and that fast. I mean, there's harder and there's faster, but I don't need to play them unless I have to.
Dude, it's really cool. So you're learning Eruption from some YouTube guy,
Yeah,
and now you're a YouTube guy. I
mean,
I know that's not all you, but I mean, now you're a YouTube guy in that kind of sense. That's really cool. All right, The Amazing Slowdowner. I've got it. You know what? If I'm not mistaken, on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, if you click the settings icon, you can also slow down.
Yeah, I learned that too. 50% and 25, which is good. I did that a few times too recently. It's quicker because it's right there. I just learned something real fast.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna let's look. I was like, hey man, let's have some guitars to look at. You've got some guitars to look at. We haven't looked at any of them. And you being a working musician, you've got your real tools of the trade with you. Not like this is one of my babies.
Yeah.
Polish it back and hang out after we're done, which is totally cool. Love that too. So as you go through 2 or 3 or whatever we've got, why you like it. I'm really curious. So I'm asking on behalf of myself, and hopefully everyone else likes the questions. Why you like it. Maybe what is the tone that you're getting from it. That whatever I'm fading tone. playability, neck, whatever it is. I'm just curious because they're really your tool and not just it's a need to have and not a nice to have for you.
Right.
So I want to know why it's the need to have and what check boxes it hits. Forgive me.
Right. Well, I'll show you first my
I'm gonna make
Strat.
you yeah.
And I bought this Strat, I think it was in 2015, 2016, but it turns out it's actually a 2013 American Strat. It's right before they came out with the Professional series on the Strats, which I'm happy about because these things feel more like the older Strats than the Professional. I do like the Professionals because of their satin necks that they have, but this one is a few years before then. And because I've always been a Strat type person, but never really owned a Strat with single coils. I had one back in the 90s that was a heavy metal Strat type. It had humbuckers. I was always a humbucker person because I couldn't deal with the 60 cycle hum growing up. There was enough noise in my crappy amps and there was enough noise in my horrible playing that I just wasn't single coil. But as I got older, you start to appreciate the sound that it gives you from single coils. So this came with like single coils, but the problem with that was I needed it to be a working guitar. So as nice as those single coils were, I wound up getting a pick guard, complete replaceable pick guard from DiMarzio, and it was what it was the oh geez, I forget his name now. It's
Is there like the everything pick guard?
yeah, it's like a full pick guard from Paul Gilbert pickup.
Okay.
And it had the DiMarzio like igniters, or yeah, the igniters. I confuse those pickups, igniters with yeah, I think they're called igniters,
cool.
but they're basically
Cool.
hum canceling pickups. And so it's like an area something in the middle, but they're not necessarily like humbuckers because they're just hum canceling the way they have them wired in there. So they still sound like single coils. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted a single coil sounding guitar, but I didn't want the hum. So unfortunately you have to sacrifice some high-end tone because the original single coils had a really nice brightness that you don't get with these replacement pickups, even though they're hum canceling. So because I needed a working guitar, I knew I wanted to play gigs with this. I was playing in an 80s tribute band and I needed some hot sounds. I also needed some clean stuff. So it needed to be a very versatile working guitar. That's why I took out this pickguard and replaced it with the Paul Gilbert igniters. And I'm very happy. I love this guitar. I've had the neck sanded on the back of it too, because this guitar came with a real glossy neck, which this was actually the first neck that I actually had sanded because I just, you know, it would just stick.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the feeling of the natural, you know, naturalness right there too. So definitely, this is my main. I take this when I have to fly to a gig, and I only have one guitar. Like this is it because I got the best of every world with this. It's a total like crunching guitar. I mean, it's not as fat as like if you had a real humbucker, but it's got a nice distortion. It sounds very unique because it has a single coil sound. And then of course I have all the combinations that you get from a Strat, from the neck pickup and all points in between. So definitely my favorite working guitar right now.
You know, and I'm smiling as you're saying this. The only people that know that you're
color.
The color's dope. It's the only guys at your gig that are like critiquing that are like the three really good guitar players. They're the only ones that are picking him. Well, he really should be playing X, Y, and Z if he was going for the tone of this song. But the rest of the world has no idea. Right?
Yeah, and it would be a backup too. Like I'd bring for my 80s gig, I had a double guitar case, and I bring my Hamer because that's my number one 80s guitar because it has the Floyd Rose, and you got to go wild and crazy in the 80s band because the 80s band is more about being a clown. You know, Eric Presti, the godfather of 80s rock, who's in the best tribute band in the country called Jesse's Girl. Jesse's Girl is an 80s tribute. I sub in them with that band every now and then.
Sweet.
He was with the Rubik's Cube originally, and that's how I originally started subbing with him. And but he told me that to be in an 80s band, it's not as much how good you are, but it's about how much of a clown you could be. Because it's all about 80s were about fun. Yeah, you want to play great. If you you're into that, but really you got to have fun for the people in the crowd. No one cares about you if you're just standing there playing note for note perfectly in an 80s band. They came to jump around to, to Tiffany, and Bon Jovi and all that fun stuff. So, but my main guitar was the Floyd and had the humbuckers in it. It's full on, but this was like my backup, and it was still able to be crunchy, but I would use that. It turns out that I would wind up using that more than the Hamer, because we were doing stuff like Cutting Crew, Just Died in Your Arms Tonight. I just died in your arms tonight. And it had that real stratty sound. So it's like, I'm using the Strat for that, it was perfect. So I wound up using that for that and the U2 stuff. And I started finding places where the Strat actually came in handy with the 80s stuff.
The Telly, talk about what its intent is, your purpose with it.
Well, I'm still trying to find that out, actually. But, it really wasn't until I'm walking down the street in New York, and I look in, I see this guy playing, and it's this place, Rockwood Music Hall, because it's glass windows out front. And you see this guy in there playing. So I'm in there I go in to see. Turns out he's probably one of the greatest guitar players. I know I said that 3 times already in the show, but seriously, this guy is up here. His name's Jim Campolongo. Jim Campolongo. I think he played with Norah Jones for many years. But his main thing is he's just a guitar aficionado. His style of playing is beyond this art. He does this thing with the bends behind the nut, incorporates into strings, and his vibrato and his tone. All he plays is a Telly through a Princeton type of amp. I think he cranks the amp up all the way, all the knobs completely open, and then he uses his volume knob just to get his sound. And when I saw him playing with the Telly, I was like, I really, really want to. That started me a few years ago, wanting to get a Telly because of the brightness that it had in there. And so, it took me 2 years of really wanting a Telly before I finally found this. So this was basically because I really wanted to get that bright sound that I lost in my Strat. That because I had the hum canceling pickups, it cuts some of the high end out. So you're not going to get that really piercing yet pleasant high end out of it. So it's I really want a single coil guitar now, but I'm not going to put my old pickups back in my Strat. So I'm going to find a Telly that's got a real fat neck on it. That's what I want. I want a 50s type of neck, which just has. And I want single coils. And I want to get that sound like Jim Campolongo, where I'm playing up really high and it's melting people's faces, but in a nice way, in a sweet way, And then one day I'm looking for Tellys, and nothing is really appealing to me. Some people were trying to sell me Tellys, but it didn't have the right neck on it or the right color. And I knew I wanted it to be the classic blonde or butterscotch look. So one day I'm in Guitar Sam Ash, and I bought a Strymon Iridium pedal because I was looking for a better pedal to go into my interface, and that pedal is perfect for that. And so I'm talking to the clerk, Zach, there at Sam Ash on 34th Street, and I say, "You don't happen to have a Telly that looking for an American Telly?" And I'm looking for a 50s type of neck, the fat neck, single coils, maybe butterscotch blonde. I goes, "Yeah, we got one right on the wall." And this was at a time where they weren't making them, because during the pandemic, Fender stopped making a lot of guitars, and all the companies, I think, they weren't making guitars. So that was part of the reason why I couldn't find the Telly that I was looking for, because they didn't have them. So he goes, "Look," he pulls this one off the wall and he shows me. I'm like, "Wait, what is that?" It's I was shocked. It's first of all, it had everything I wanted. And they were closing. It was 10 minutes to closing. It's one of those things where you had to make a decision quick.
Yeah.
So I guess I wasn't ready. I wasn't looking to buy the guitar that day because I bought the pedal already. But like I said, I've been looking for this for 2 years for the right guitar. It just didn't hit me yet. So he pulls out this guitar and I'm looking at it. Had checked off all the boxes, the right color, the right pickups, the fat neck. I plugged it in for a second. I was like, let me just hear this. At like 5 minutes, everyone's closing. Like, get out. We just, enough's enough. This place already. And I was like, you know what? I'll take it. And it was like the most expensive guitar I've ever bought. And I mean, to that point, like I bought that like in 2015. I paid like, I think it was like $1,000. I got like $300 off of it, brand new, 1,000 for Strat. So it was great. But this was like $2,000, this guitar. And I was like,
Yeah.
very expensive for me. And this was like still the world hadn't come back yet. I was just starting to go out to music stores and look at stuff, so still it's like I was broke, but I had but I knew I needed this guitar, you know what I mean? Because like, when am I going to find this again? Because it was hard to find already. So I bought it, and I've been happy with it. Like I'm still like, I've never done a real gig outside the house with it yet, but I've done many live streams, and I do all my lives with it and stuff, and really comes in handy. I've had the actual neck shaved a little bit. Like, the guy wanted to take it real slow because he didn't want to like deface the instrument. So if you look at it, you can't even see that the neck has been kind of, taken off a little. You could see maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But I still would like a little bit more. He's kind of taking it slow, where it's like, hey, just come back and I could take a little bit off at a time. The only thing about this guitar I probably don't love is the fact that the frets are kind of low profile frets, which makes it a little bit harder to play, which I'm okay with, because I tend to like play really fast a lot of times anyway. And if it slows you down, that's probably a better thing, to play more tasteful. And it's really smooth. Like, I could even, the benefit of this thing is you could probably just hear it. Or hear it a little bit. So it's like, it's got a really nice high sound right here.
Woo, yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, it's piercing, but it like bites you. And that's what I really wanted. So it has that sound, and it really bends really nicely. They're really smooth frets. So definitely love this guitar, and I'm thinking about putting jumbo frets on it, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's
why not? If I'm more comfortable with it, and it plays. And the guy who does my guitar work, my luthier, his name's Matt over at 30th Street Guitars. He's the best. He actually designed new saddles here to where, because this is, first of all, this is it's a broadcaster. This is a 70th anniversary guitar, and basically the Tele came out in 1950, when it was actually called a broadcaster, which is what this is. And then they got sued by, I guess, Gretsch had a drum set called the Broadcaster, so they had to scratch the name off. It was called a No-Caster for a little bit, then it turned into a Telecaster. So this is basically a copy of the original first Telecaster ever created, called the Broadcaster. So it has all the same type of features. It actually came with a electronic device that would change just to how the wiring was in 1950, which was weird. It came like a stock, with the pickups in line. We could switch them normally, but if you put in this little resistor, I think it changes like this tone knob to do something that they did in the 50s. It like would muffle one of the pickups to where it would sound like an upright bass in a weird way. But I don't do that. I just want to leave it like a regular sounding Tele. And so it also came with, like, which a lot of Teles I guess come with, just 3 saddles here. So if you want to deal with intonation, it's apparently harder because you only have one per 2 strings. So you can't intonate the strings separately. So Matt came up with a device where it's a new saddle where each string has its own spring here that you could intonate, get it a little bit better in tune. So I'm thinking about replacing that, getting a fret job, and then sanding the neck a little bit more. And then you got like it's worth $4,000 to me, because I've played some of these that are like $4,000. That's really the only difference, that they have jumbo frets, necks worn. And I'm already, I've looked online. These things people are selling them for like $2,400. So that's
really good.
the good thing about buying like good guitars, and usually American guitars, because their value just either stays the same or increases.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this guitar already is $400 more than what I paid for it. The Strat already is going to be, that much more. And I'm not really thinking about resale value, but that's part of the reason why, when I buy guitars, I like to buy valuable guitars, not expensive guitars, but guitars that aren't going to really lose any value over the years.
Well, you get to play it for free, is basically what it comes down to, man.
But speaking of free, actually, this one was free.
Tell me about that.
This guitar was free, if you're lucky like me. Well, at the time, I had just joined the Chubby Checker band, and one of the first things that we were doing was a television show. It was like one of the morning shows, like NBC. We did a few of them, so I think this was NBC, and it was the morning show. And someone had told me to reach out to Gibson and say, hey, that you're playing on TV, maybe get a guitar for it. So I wound up calling Gibson, and I said, hey, I'm playing guitar with Chubby Checker. And this is 2008. I'm playing guitar with Chubby Checker. We're playing the morning show, and I think I should be playing a Gibson, because Gibson, they have the best guitars, and this show is viewed by millions of people, and they should see me playing a Gibson because Gibson's the best, and and that's what we should be playing. So the guy told me, he goes, okay, go to the Gibson website and just pick out anything you want.
What?
This is 2008. So, but it turns out that I didn't really want anything from the Gibson website, because I had my eye on this guitar, this specific guitar that was sitting in their showroom, which they have. I'm not even sure if it's still there, but it was on 54th Street between like 8th Avenue. It was on the west side, 54th. It was a Gibson showroom. You go in there and it was all Gibson. It was like Gibson amps, Epiphone stuff, Gibson guitars, every type of Gibson. It was a really cool, like, it was their showroom where I guess they would have the artists would come in, and that was their whole like endorsement place. So I had been in there. I forgot the reasons why I was even in there to begin with. Like, I think it was maybe I was just walking by and I happened to notice the place I got in somehow, or maybe I was delivering something there from when I was working with Backline company. So anyway, I knew about this place. I had my eye on this SG that was just sitting there for a while. So when the opportunity came to get a guitar, like the sound of Chubby's band at the time to me sounded like AC/DC. It was very driving. It was very like it was very, the music was kind of, it was, the twist was very, very driving. He would never let you go up and down. You're fired if you did that.
How about
You had
that?
to go like this. I'd have to find spaces in between to rest my wrist, in between like the turnaround. I'd go like just for that brief on the A or whatever. Because if you turned around and saw it, and it sounds different, going like this, as opposed to going. That's why punk rockers go down. It's more meaty because you're attacking the E string.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, do that for like 2 hours every night, and it's like your wrist wants to fall off. So I knew it sounded like AC/DC. It was not your grandfather's or your father's Chubby Checker band. I played 2 Marshall stacks, and it was a very chunkin'. Of course, I'm playing clean now, but it was distortion, was full on. I mean, he played like arena, he played like big places, and you had to be loud, and he wanted it loud and rocking. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just get an SG. I'd never owned an SG before. Angus Young was my favorite original guitarist growing up. AC/DC is what this sounds like. I mean, an SG through a Marshall stack is like the sound. So I wound up getting this guitar. I know it's a long story for it, but I got the guitar. I think a year later, 2 years later, I got the case for it. The guy who gave me the guitar was like gone. Like I think I might have got the last free guitar from Gibson because I called up to get the case and they were struggling to give me the case. They're like, we don't give anything anymore. It's like, and the guy even said to me, he goes, even if you were Brett Michaels, you're not getting like a free guitar, which is probably a lie. He's getting guitars. But they really tightened up, I guess, right after that. I might be the last guy they gave a guitar to, and they may even be looking for it. That's to say, I shouldn't be like, they're going to come to me like, 15 years later, hey, that guitar, we want it back. Yeah. Try coming and getting it, But no, they gave it to me as an endorsement. So I was endorsed by Gibson for that time because I played on a couple of TV shows with it and, and I got the case for it, a year later, sitting back there. So this was my main guitar for like the first 3.5 years until I was in Canada and this guy took me to the shop called Carparelli, who was in Canada. And they made guitars there. And I wound up buying for like really cheap. They gave me a deal on this Carparelli, which was like a Les Paul. And I've used it in like some of my videos that have Les Paul, like Sweet Child of Mine. I'm using it. It's a beautiful, like quilt top, like Les Paul looking, guitar copy. And it sounds really great. It's got the humbuckers. I mean, I use that because it sounded better than this at the time. It was just like fuller, but man, was it heavy. I think I lost 2 vertebrae, playing that guitar for a year, as opposed to this thing. It's like literally twice as heavy as this guitar. So this guitar, and now it's like after the gig, I still use it for like, heavy stuff. It has a very unique sound to it. It's a Gibson, so it's got that warmer, woody sound, as opposed to the Strat, but it's not as versatile as the Strat. If I got to bring one guitar, if this is all I had, which is what at the time, I would bring this. But then the Strat, you can get the crunch out of it. You can't get as crunchy as this out of that Strat, but you got better clean sound. And this clean sound is not as versatile as the Strat. Plus, this is more fragile to travel with. It doesn't stay in tune as good as the Strat. The Strat's like a very balanced workhorse. This guitar is a little bit neck heavy. So if I have it on a Strat, it's going to fall forward a little bit, which I hate. That's my main concern of guitars is when I put it on a strap, I want it to sit perfectly balanced. With this, if it's where the strap is, it would just constantly fall. So you're constantly trying to hold the guitar balanced while you're playing, which makes it a little bit harder to do. But very special guitar to me, this Gibson, especially as I didn't pay anything for it.
That's cool, man. You trying to track down the case. They're like, man, Jerry's calling again. He's looking for that dang SG case. Can we
imagine they gave me the guitar, no case for the first year. I had no case. I think it was a gig bag that I had it in, traveling around with it, on the tour bus. And however we travel on the plane, obviously, it's a gig bag. Fighting with it. I mean, that's still to this day the worst part about being a guitarist and gigging guitarist is going to the airport with your guitar.
Yeah.
It's just hard to try to get it on and overhead. I mean, even though I have a case that fits, it's molded for, it's very narrow. It's still people, they don't want you to, they always give you a hard time. They want you to check it, gate check it. And it's like, no, I'm going to try to get it in.
Yeah.
It's the law that says they have to at least try before they tell you to gate check it,
Oh, nice. Yeah, you can throw the book at them.
Yeah,
so you know the laws here, sir. I'm going to try this out first.
Yeah, so it's just traveling with a guitar is always a pain in the butt, but you got to do it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. And
dude, this has been. Were you going back for more?
Well, then I have this one.
Yeah.
Which is my acoustic. This is probably the oldest guitar that I have, and I actually bought this in 1996. It was used on consignment at the music store MAE that I worked at. And but it turns out it's a 92. It's a Taylor C10. Yeah, it's a 410. That's C10. It's 1992 410. And I think I paid I don't remember what I paid for it back then, but I mean, what a beautiful guitar this is. Doing my acoustic work. I still gig with this. You know, when I do acoustic duos, I record with it. And it's got a beautiful sound to it. You know, probably way out of tune because I haven't played it. You know, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
So very warm sounding guitar. And I've had this, like I said, I've had this longer than any other guitar that I have here. 1997, I bought it, you know, and still to this day, people love the sound of it. You know, Martins are great guitars, and you know, Taylors have a good reputation as well. And some of the newer ones are very fancy. But I think I'm proud of this one because it's pretty old and it's lasted me quite a while. You know, so I try to take care of this thing, you
It
know, to
looks
the
like
best
it's
of my
got some love
ability.
on it, man, for sure.
You know, yeah, love this one. And I think if I had just one guitar, it would definitely be just this one.
Wow.
You know, out of all of them, if I had to get rid of all of them, because this means the most to me. You know, you could take this and just the purity of just an acoustic guitar is beautiful. And so, and then, you know, I'm a bass player. I don't know if you knew this, but I'm a bass player as well.
I barely knew it, but
Yeah,
I
yeah, I'm a bassist.
Did you pick up the bass like because someone needed a bass, like y'all needed a bassist at some point, or just by default, like I can do that?
Well, there's an old joke that I made, and it was like, how do you turn a guitar? How do you get a guitar player to play bass? You know, hit him in the head with a rock. That's horrible. I'm gonna get a lot of slack from bass players, but no.
It's fine. Bass players know that.
But I was just looking for a gig. You know, I needed after the Chubby thing ended. Here I was, like out of work. This is back in 2012, beginning of 2012, and I was going back to my job that I did before, which was backline, which I delivered backline equipment. I set up and I would test backline, which is like guitars, amps, everything on the stage. I did that for years. So I couldn't get a job doing that for a while. And I'm playing in all these working bands. After the Chubby gig, I'm joining all these a 90s cover band. So I've never been in a cover band before. Chubby was really my first working even cover band. Like I never played any covers or anything my whole life. I was always playing originals and writing. So when I started getting into the cover scene, you know, it was like my expectations of the bands were like really high because I'd come off with a legend. And now you're getting into you're starting to play with bar bands. So you don't take things as serious as you do. And I didn't really like understand that as much. I expected like a level of musicianship that I was already in with playing with Chubby, and it just wasn't getting that around. So I wasn't like wise enough to just, you know, to appreciate what I was in, and that not everybody's expectations and goals are to be, you know, top notch. They don't live for music, and they don't want to take it any further than playing a bar gig every now and then. That's totally cool. But I was probably a jerk for not getting that from them. You know, I expected more, and I probably shouldn't have. So, long story short, I needed a gig, and I was just a sub in some gigs. I didn't have a full, like my thing was like, hey, I want to get into another gig because Chubby was a full-time gig. Where can I find another gig? You know, so, and then all of a sudden, I started playing bass, which I noodled around all my life with bass a little bit. The 80s band that I was subbing for on guitar, the Rubik's Cube, that 80s band that's still around, they needed a bass player, and I already subbed on guitar, and they're like, hey, can you play bass? I'm like, yeah, I could play the bass. So I wound up, their bass player was actually in Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and during the winter he'd have to go on tour with them. So I actually filled in on bass during the winters with this 80s band to take place for him. And his name was David Z, and unfortunately he passed away a few years back. But great bass player, great person. He passed away, unfortunately. And but I was covering for him, playing the bass and just playing 80s stuff, with a pick. Never played with my finger. I'd play all the 80s stuff with the pick, which was easy for me because I knew all the guitar work, right? But you have to listen to the bass lines and get all of them down as well. So drummer friend who actually played with Dave Z in a band called ZO2, he's a drummer. He was playing around in all the 80s bands too. And he had mentioned to me, he's like, hey, my brother-in-law has a disco band. They're looking for a bass player. If you know anybody, they're a really good band, And I was like, I knew some bass. I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a shot, And so I was like, okay. So I set up an audition for them. They were a great working band. And I went up and I learned like 5 of the songs. One of them was like Dancing Queen. And there was the other ones where it's like, like, so one of them was Dancing Queen. And I'm not as good as I am now with it. It took me this is years ago. This is like 2014. I'd never played with my fingers before on the bass, never. And when I went for the audition, I think I did because the songs weren't hard enough to where just because I'd played guitar, I played a little bit of like picking with my hand, with my left hand, to where I think that gave me a little bit of experience and control to play with my fingers on the bass. So I think I used and it turns out the band was so cool. I mean, they were like, I think I killed it. The 5 songs, I kind of went in, we just jammed, and it was really fun. I'm not even sure if the guitar player was there at the time. I think it was just the drummer, 2 female singers, the male singer who actually was the musical director and keyboard player. And but he was happy with it. He goes, I don't care if you play with a pick, your fingers, as long as you play the right notes, that's all that matters to me. And I was like, these guys were really good. And they said, if you want the gig, you got it. And I was like, oh my God, that's cool. Of course. And he told me, he goes, well, we don't really pay a lot, but we play a lot. You're not going to make as much as you were in like these other bands per gig, but it's enough work where it adds up. It was a steady band, and I was like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm in it. I want to be in a band. I want to be the main guy. Cause at that point I was just subbing. I was like the fill-in.
Yeah.
But real quick story on that is like a few months into it, after I'm learning all this material, I wound up leaving the band because one of the 80s bands needed a full-time guitarist. Okay. And I was like, I want to play guitar, and I did it. But what turns out was that band, like sometimes, you don't always get along in a musical situation with people. And after a while, I realized that I actually wound up going back to the disco band because, even though I was playing bass, I enjoyed it, but the chemistry that you have with certain people, outweighs some other things that you may look at. Like I didn't really get along with their situation. I felt like, they didn't want to be the type of band that I wanted it to be. Like once again, their expectations of where they wanted to be were here, and I envisioned it to be the best of it, and I thought they could be. And the only thing that was stopping them from doing that was themselves. But that's enough. I can't force them into doing stuff that they don't want to do. So rather than just being miserable in it, I left and I went back to the disco band where everyone knew what they wanted in the band. They wanted to be the best disco band. There was no question about it. They wanted to play the music perfectly. So I've never had any issues, and I've been doing it with them for years, playing disco bass, and it's taught me so much about guitar. I know I don't play really a lot of bass. As a matter of fact, I've only done 2 videos out of hundreds of videos that actually focus on the bass, where I did this thing about Do you think I'm sexy? Bass line I did when Phil passed away, the guy who wrote it, and then I did another thing where I did an Ampeg plugin because I was recording my album. I thought, well, I'll do a video on one of the plugins, the Ampeg bass plugin, and how I record bass. So basically, I only made 2 videos on basses, and now I have 3 basses. Now I own 3 basses. I own this. I own a P bass, and my first bass that I bought from the original bass player of Disco Unlimited. It's a G&L tribute. It's like I guess a lower line G&L that I use forever. Now this is my main one that I just got. I just bought this past Thanksgiving.
Oh, cool, man. Yeah.
So definitely love this. I'm very proud of this guitar right here for sure. Because I bought a P bass by accident. The P bass, because I needed a backup, and I bought a P bass because you think, well, that's the best bass, right? You P bass. But it turns out that for this band, it was too dark. It was too bottomy. I didn't get the click, and I need a lot of high-end clicky to play these disco riffs. And I didn't realize that just like a guitar, you have to have a pickup closer to the bridge to get that sound of the brightness, which the jazz basses have the 2 pickups, and I'm able to get a little bit more of a high end. Whereas the P bass, if you just, and it's great for like certain things. Like if you can use the pick and you're playing, some rock, it's great. It's the best for that. Or even when I'm recording, but playing live with it, it was just too low endy. I couldn't get it. I couldn't hear it with all the mush going on live on a big stage. It's just like mud. Even if you're standing right in front of the amp, you just like can't even hear. So finally, the same thing like with the Telly. I searched for like 2 years to get a good deal and the right jazz bass, and finally, it was before Thanksgiving, and the guy's like, "I'll give you $200 off of this." It was like $14.99. Give it to you for $12. Take it. Done.
Yes.
And that was it. And that's how I buy my guitars. I get guitars that I need, that I use. Like every guitar that I have was like a tool that you can't get from another guitar. Like with these 3 here, each one of them is a completely different sound. Can I live with just one guitar? Yeah, I mean, be the Strat, but then I wouldn't get that sweet high-end bite that this Telly gives, or I wouldn't get that warm crunch tone that the SG would give you. So I think after a while, and this, it's just like guitars are like tools, and they give you sounds. I use my Hamer when I need the metal stuff because it's got a really nice pickups, and it's got the Floyd Rose on it. That's something that none of these guitars can do.
Right. It's in your buying guitars. If you're patient, you have to be patient.
Yeah.
What you're looking for will come your way within the price range, as long as you have a reasonable expectation, you've done your research. But if you're patient, you'll win. If you're impatient, then you'll get what you want. Maybe you're gonna overpay, probably for sure, and then B, you may sacrifice on the color or something because you're like, I'm gonna get it.
Yeah. And it's still something. Even when I bought that bass, sometimes I'll buy it and I was like, I just know and I have to get it. And then I'll look, and then a day later I'll go, you know what? My P bass has a maple neck, and it's got maple's like a sweeter high-end sound. Oh, this is rosewood. So you're like, oh, maybe I should have got it with maple. So it's little things like that. But then you don't care. It's like, you know what? Now I love it. And the neck's not as fat. The neck's kind of thin on it. Well, but it's different, and I still like it. So sometimes we overanalyze things too much of what we think we want.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just get something because you just feel it's right, and you just go with it, and you wind up loving it later on.
For good players, it's all in the hands, man.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You gotta be able to capture a sound you're going for, but it's you good guys, it's all in the hands. Everybody, it's all in the hands.
It's absolutely the truth.
It's yeah.
It's class. I think even the story was like Eddie Van Halen and Ted Nugent switched rigs once. Eddie played Ted Nugent's rig on a tour, sounded like Eddie. Ted Nugent played Eddie Van Halen's rig, sounded like Ted Nugent. I mean,
yeah, right.
It's all who you are,
Dude, well, I think that's a great spot to jump off from, man. It's all who you are. I'll say my big takeaway for our conversation, man, is you were just like a wonderful lifelong learner.
Oh yeah.
You're a student, and we should all be that way. But if you ever come back and listen to the story, which I get, you probably won't listen to your own podcast. But if you did,
No, I can't. I'll watch this back for sure. I want to
yeah,
know if
man,
I'm looking at the camera. I'm looking at you.
you'll see. I hope you pick up. That's my
Yeah.
takeaway. That's a recurring theme, which is really special and really cool.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
man. This has been a lot of fun, Jerry. Hey, I'll put all the links in the notes. Everybody who's hung on, man, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for everything, Jerry. Any parting thoughts? Are you good, brother?
Well, just check out my my website, jerrycherry.com, where I have a guitar course. All this stuff doing as far as my YouTube channel led me to build a very simple course, and which allows me to connect with more people. Showing like what I think are the essentials in guitar, which is fretboard memorization, the circle of fifths, and playing the blues, because that's where you get all your soul and feel comes from. So I put it all into a simple course. You can see it at my website. And every week I go live on YouTube, Jerry Cherry Band, and that's basically it. Just doing my thing. Oh, and my new show that I release every Wednesday called What's the Hook, where I take a song. My first one came out last week. I did Tom Petty, American Girl, and I use clips. And I'm trying to see how far I can go with it before YouTube takes me down on it. But people are using fair use. I'm using this fair use clips where I'll just, I'll play the song, I'll play along with it, I'll talk about the harmony of the song, I'll stop it, and I'll talk about the lyric and what it means to me. And usually really quick. It was only like a 10-minute video, but it's something I've always wanted to do, and it's called What's the Hook? Check out some of those videos as well. I think they're a lot of fun, and I'm taking suggestions and requests on what songs to do for What's the Hook as well.
Awesome, man. I'll make sure I put that in there, dude. Brother, appreciate your time, man. This is a treat.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much.
Oh man, hold on one second. We'll wrap for a minute in the green room here in a second. Everybody, thanks so much for your time. Hope you enjoyed the show. Of course, if you did, man, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and we'll see you on the next go round. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.